What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a new release horror movie that is the third installment in this franchise. That, if you've watched the first two films by now, you've probably made a decision as to whether or not these movies are your cup of tea. And to be honest, I've talked about this when I reviewed the second film in this series. The first movie did not do it for me. I did not enjoy it. I didn't think it had great characterization. I felt like the pacing was really off and it was kind of tedious to get through. But I heard a lot of great things about the second movie, went into it with an open mind, and surprisingly, it was one of my favorite horror movies of that year. I thought the practical effects were great. I thought the performances were fantastic. And despite some people saying that they felt like the runtime was bloated, I was immersed for the entire 2 hour and 20-minute experience. And so when I heard this was announced, I was very excited, hoping we were getting more of what the second film was like. And I also saw that this one was set around Christmas, which I love Christmas themed horror movies. I think it's so interesting to take a time of year that so many people associate with like joy and giving and turn it into something very sinister. And so I've been really looking forward to watching this movie, and I'm very excited to tell you about Terrifier 3 today. Terrifier 3 is directed by Damien Leone. 5 years after surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and Jonathan are struggling to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind. But just when they think they're safe, Art returns, determined to turn the holiday cheer into a new nightmare. This festive season quickly unravels as Art unleashes his twisted brand of terror, proving that no holiday is safe. So, I have been very excited to watch this movie. Like I said, I was a huge fan of Terrifier 2, despite not being a fan of the first movie at all. And this movie is awesome. I absolutely loved it. It's everything I love about this style of horror. Damien Leone clearly understands what he wants to do with these movies. And I think he had building blocks with Terrifier, and obviously he did some other films before that, introducing Art the Clown as the character, but I think he really understands the style and the tone of these movies, and he really wants them to be aggressively violent, and he wants to showcase the violence, unlike a lot of slasher films in the past where you get a lot of cutaway kills. He is not afraid to show you exactly what he wants to show you, which I give him a lot of respect because he does it, and he does it in a way that is gruesomely horrifying. And I really appreciated this movie for much more than just the gore. I love the way that it was shot. I think it has a great style. I think it explores some interesting ideas associated with the second Terrifier film, and I'm excited to talk about this movie with you today. So obviously, if you've never seen the first two Terrifier movies, when I talk about this film, it's going to spoil things that happen in the second and the first movie. So if you're interested in this franchise and you haven't seen Terrifier 1 and 2, go watch those movies and then come back and watch my review when you've eventually seen the third. So at the beginning of Terrifier 3, we get one of the most horrific sequences I've seen in a movie this year, setting us up for the Christmas atmosphere. And we see Art, after the events of Terrifier 2, going to this hospital with Victoria, who was the final girl from the first movie who has now been incredibly deformed and apparently possessed by this spirit, who is seemingly the spirit that was possessing that little girl in the second Terrifier movie. And so they escape this hospital and they go to this abandoned home and they essentially lie dormant for 5 years. And then we jump 5 years into the future and we are reintroduced to Sienna Shaw, played by Lauren LaVera, who is at a psychiatric hospital, and she's trying to work through all of the issues surrounding what happened in the second film. Not only losing her mother, but all the violence that she experienced, her friend being brutally murdered, all the things that she saw continued to terrorize her. And she eventually leaves this hospital to go live with her aunt and her husband and their daughter, Gabby, who's a younger girl that is just obsessed with Sienna. She loves her. She just wants to be exactly like her. And she's trying to feel some level of normalcy around the holiday season. And Jonathan, her brother, is off at college. He's trying to start his life. He's doing everything that he can to just try to feel some sense of normalcy. And while he's at college, he's approached by this young girl who does a true crime podcast. She's constantly like hounding him about being on this podcast. Well, eventually, Art reawakens in this house when some people show up that want to destroy the house because it's been sitting vacant for forever. Him and Victoria end up murdering these people. He leaves the house and starts to go on a murder rampage, eventually coming face to face with Sienna and Jonathan again. And the entirety of the film is Sienna and Jonathan once again trying to survive Art the Clown. So, like I said, I loved this movie. I thought that it was so well done. There's so much attention to detail in every little element of the movie. But I want to start off with the practical effects. I am a practical effects guy. I've talked about it on my YouTube for forever. I love when you abandon CGI and you do everything in a practical way because there's something about it that feels so much more visceral and realistic, especially when it comes to depicting violence on screen, that practical effects can showcase so much better than CGI. And this movie has some of the most gnarly and incredible practical effects that I have ever seen in a movie, period. It takes a lot to gross me out anymore. And I don't necessarily think that this is even the most violent thing that I've ever witnessed, but there are some things in this that genuinely made me cringe. And I give Damien Leone the utmost respect for that. I think it takes a lot to kind of get anything out of me, and he managed it. And it's incredible, just the way that he pays attention to it. The kills, like normally in a movie, if someone's being hacked over and over again, you might get the initial hit and like blood going out, and then you cut away. He just lets it sit there and go over and over and over again to where you see limbs disconnect and parts of the face shatter, scalps being ripped off, all different kinds of things that it takes a lot of time and effort to be able to showcase that through those practical effects. And he doesn't pull back in this movie. He's really showcasing all of his level of talent and this entire crew that worked on this movie and just how much went into it. And I really respect them a lot for that. If blood makes you queasy, this is definitely not the movie for you. There's so many scenes, and I don't want to give away anything because I think it's so much better to just go in and watch it blind. But there are some things in this movie that will be a shock to you when you watch it. The performances in this are great. Lauren LaVera as Sienna is probably one of my favorite final girls in a film in years. She's just so great in this role, and I feel like they did an amazing job establishing her character in Terrifier 2. And in this movie, I love how it looks at trauma and trying to overcome your trauma and the way that they showcase it through hallucinations that she's having and how much she tries to put on a face to feel normal despite having experienced all this awful stuff in her life, and not to mention before all these events losing her father and just all of those things, and trying to move forward in life, and how difficult it is when it feels like around every corner something is waking up those feelings. And I like the way that Damien Leone looks at that. There's also this really fascinating side plot in this movie with the true crime podcaster that really kind of dives into humanity's fascination with true crime and like the obsession with prying into these people's lives, and how many people see these horrible experiences as like entertainment. And it's really interesting to think about that, where it's like people will see these tragedies people suffer and like get entertainment value out of it. And it's just a fascinating thing that our society does. And I feel like Damien taps into it a little bit. It's not necessarily the central focal point of the movie, but I like that that was incorporated. I thought it added an interesting idea into the film. David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown is incredible. I cannot get over how great of just a bodily and facial performance that he gives, because he doesn't speak, he doesn't have any lines of dialogue, but I feel like he has so much personality just through his facial expressions and little things, like at the beginning of the movie when he does a kill and then cleans the dishes in the dining room. And there's all of these different little nuances that his character has that I love, that just adds such a sinister tone. There's something to me that resembles Freddy Krueger so much in his character as to how he's able to come across as kind of like playful and comical, but in the most disturbing way imaginable. Like all the goofing off that he's doing and the things that the comedy that he's adding on screen always has a sinister undertone. And that's what I love so much about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, is that Freddy's character, he is a menacing presence. Like there's no doubt, like when you're watching a scene with him in it, he's menacing, he's terrifying, but he has his playful moments. And I think it takes a lot for a director to take a risk risk and say, okay, we're going to try the comedy angle here. And I think David Howard Thornton, being as incredible of an actor as he is, really just brings that to life so perfectly. And there's a lot of moments in this that I will not be able to get out of my head anytime soon, especially when it comes to the comedic beats. And I think everyone in this movie does a really excellent job, but those two performers in particular really are the standout. And I think that's what is going to bring longevity to this series, is just the dedication from these performers to bring this story to life. And that's what I like so much about it. I'm always immersed and just completely invested from the very first frame. I love that this movie is set on Christmas. It's just so interesting to take like the most joyful time of year and turn it into something so sinister and horrifying. Black Christmas is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and this film even pays homage to Black Christmas in a couple of scenes, which I really liked a lot. You can tell Damien Leone has a passion for horror and for Christmas themed horror. And you can see that through a lot of little nods that he has in this movie. There's a couple of cameos from some horror icons. I actually smiled pretty big when Tom Savini made a cameo in this movie. He's someone I look up to so much. His practical effects are just some of the greatest of all time. And it was really cool, as someone who loves practical effects like Damien Leone, it was cool to see. I'm assuming he's got to be one of his heroes, putting him in his movie. And I just love seeing that. Someone who's passionate about the genre, incorporating other people from the genre into his movies. And it was just a blast. This movie, if you are a horror fan and a slasher fan in particular, you're going to love this. If you like excessive gore, you'll definitely get your fill by the end of this movie. And the score to this movie is great. I've really enjoyed the score of the past two films. I think that they just match the tone so brilliantly. And I had a blast with this, and I'm already really looking forward to watching it again. It is so gnarly and just in your face, and I love a movie that is unforgiving. There's a lot of like overt blasphemous imagery in this. The religious themes are really interesting, and I like that Damien Leone goes in such an absurdist direction in the third act that I never would have expected. And I think if this sounds like an interesting movie to you, you should definitely check it out. So have you seen Terrifier 3? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was incredible. I loved every second of it, and I can't wait to see it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.